It's a Spotify podcast. You pushed me down, thought I'd stay on the ground, counting me.
All right, we are live. All right, looks like everything's working. Steve-O Benebo, what's going on, brother?
Another week.
Another week, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, tell me about it. What's going on with your weeks?
So, my uncle Rainey was inducted into the Agricultural Teachers Association's Hall of Fame.
Wow!
So,
congratulations! That's awesome.
Yeah, he was an ag teacher a long time down in the valley, and was recognized for a lifetime of work and dedication.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So,
what else is going on?
Let's see. My Aunt Margaret turned 76. She had her birthday.
Wow, that's cool.
And so a couple family milestones. Nice.
That is nice. That's super
things.
nice.
We have my mother-in-law home. That's been interesting, a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But we're working through it.
Okay.
And Sylvia's off. She was supposed to have an apostille today, but paperwork didn't get here in time. So
how'd that big one go?
He backed out of it. He's mad because of the cost.
Well, of course. But he's going to get charged it anyway. So
yeah, it was.
It is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and it wasn't. No one knew, including because this was through one of our partnerships with someone in Houston.
Why don't you explain to everybody what a apostille service does?
Yeah, so anytime, and you can be an apostille for any state, but anytime you have to get paperwork certified by the state, the Secretary of State's office, you have to go and present that paperwork and get it certified.
Somebody physically has to go and stand there, and so his wife's business, she does that.
Yeah. So you don't have to travel. So you don't have to travel in. You can send her the documents, and she'll go down and get the paperwork received and stamped by the state. So there's a courier component for it. There's a shipping component for it. Obviously, these things are generally time sensitive, but depending on the paperwork. But this one in particular, he was buying something and needed to get a criminal record certified. And when she took it down, because that was the first one she had done, so the Secretary of State's office looked at it and said, even though it's one packet of work, it's 38 different documents, and you can only get 10 documents a day certified.
Yeah.
So that was going to be four different trips, each of the stamps. So
did she at least get paid for her initial trip down there, or did she just call?
So she was down there anyway. She does enough business. So used to be walking, and I
you used to just sign at the front and walk right back there, right into it.
Yeah. So now you can do that you can technically do that any day, but walk-ins are supposed to be primarily restricted to Mondays and Fridays.
Okay.
And you can go Tuesday, you can go any other day in the morning, but they only have so many slots that they'll let people sign up.
Just let everybody know, in Austin, Texas, it's right across the street from the Capitol, so there's very little parking. It's a pain to get in there, and then to find out when did they close it down, Monday and Fridays?
So
because it used to not. Of course, I always went on Mondays, so I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah, so it's within the last 6 or 7 months.
Oh, okay.
So they're renovating that building. So it's actually down. It's down It's still on 11th, but it's down towards Guadalupe. It's in an
Oh, so
auxiliary.
they're not in the same
They're
building
not in
across.
the same. Yeah, so since they're in an auxiliary, they'll go back
Oh, okay.
after the
Okay. Okay.
renovation, but that renovation is going to take 18 months, 2.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's an old building,
It's an
so
old historical building,
yeah,
and they've so no telling what they find once they get into it.
sure.
So because they have limited space, they went to an appointment system.
Of course, that space was only 2 rooms and it was tiny.
Yeah.
You could only fit like, I mean, if you packed everybody in there, like 20 people max. So,
Yes. So, and I've gone and done it for a couple of times, and the one time I went, the guy behind me, he, he did it all the time, and so you go in the building. There's a little staircase, a hallway, a turn. You're in line. You're usually not even on that first stairway.
right.
But he got to the threshold. He slaps his hand on it. And he goes, "From here, it's an hour.
Yeah.
It's an hour wait." So
Yeah. For some reason, I figured out a system. I used to go down there quite a bit. I'm trying to remember what I did. It wasn't for anybody else. I was researching companies.
yeah.
And so I would get on those computers in that back room back there and research owners of companies and all that kind of stuff. So anyway,
Anyway, so yeah, so she has when they went to the appointment system. Basically, she set up she sets up appointments on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then she goes and looks for work to fill those appointments, and she can always release them. So she doesn't want to take up a space if she doesn't need it, but so she's been working her business around that, and she'll still do now if you need it done on a Wednesday and the paperwork arrives on Wednesday.
might as well plug her since you've talked
Yeah.
about her this much.
So signature plus notary,
Yeah.
and it services, and she does apostille, she does fingerprinting, she does I-9 verification. She does a whole bunch of services, and she's adding translations for
Oh,
for
cool.
legal documents. Now she's partnering with a third party, but she'll be the primary front for the service.
Cool.
So just she keeps on expanding, and
It sounds like she's growing.
yeah,
That's good.
yeah, she's excited. If she gets a couple of clients for the translation service, and she's got some nibbles. One of her partners in Houston, they do a lot of work in South America, and they don't have a translation service. So
Does your wife speak Spanish?
she does,
Oh, okay.
but she does everything. When you get started, entrepreneur, small business, you hustle, and she was doing.
Well, she's hustling.
Yeah,
I mean, she's doing good.
Yeah, she was. I mean, she matched her annual income before June this year from last
Oh,
year.
congratulations.
Yeah. So, and she had almost tripled her income from the year before.
I know she's a hustler. I mean, you tell me every time. I mean, you've been telling me, all the stuff she does, and I'm like, wow, that is. Because I used to be a notary, but I'd only do it for real estate contracts and stuff like that. That's about the extent I would do. But I mean, for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a broker and I was all that, but I just do it just to do it. But I didn't make a business out of it, so that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. She's done field inspections and car inspections and for insurance companies, or after the I guess it was about a year ago, she got one of the companies that landed the big FEMA company had to farm out all the inspections, and she went and took a million pictures of hundreds of
Now, that's some
houses.
hard work right there.
So it was the initial inspection, so it wasn't too bad. You could get almost all the pictures from the road. Half the time she didn't have to leave the car, but it was they were like $10-15.
Right.
So it was a volume thing. She would get 15 or 20 and spend a couple hours doing a big loop, and she would work with them to get them grouped. But yeah, so she wants, that's not a great, kept the lights on in the early years, but she's hoping that she's this year will be the last year of that, and maybe in Q4 that she drops that piece of the business.
Well,
Um,
you know, that's awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome.
you
So,
know, well, and you know, we may talk about it. It's it may be something that we keep and farm out, and maybe our first, you know,
yeah.
just get someone, you know, gig economy, you know, Uber, you know, similar to
She
an
needs
Uber
to save
driver.
up and get her a $45,000 Tesla bot.
There you go.
Send it out there and have it taking pictures. So, yeah, man. So what else is going on?
So yeah, that's all the stuff on the personal front.
Yeah,
Job hunting is still hunting.
yeah.
It gets
That's how's that
frustrating.
going?
It's
You've been looking at
frustrating.
statistics or anything? Is I haven't.
Yeah. So you know, it's good and bad. You know, you hear the stuff that makes headlines. Obviously, is you know, big company.
Unemployment's going up or something.
Well, big companies having big layoffs in sectors.
Oh, okay.
So you know,
Are they hitting certain sectors right now? I mean, obviously the tech is getting hit hard, but what else is getting hit? You know?
so it's primarily tech. It's you know, we talked about it a little bit last time. HR was hit early, and that continues to be a trend.
So
Um,
HR, you know what's odd about HR is, um, with the layoffs, they're going to need HR people.
yeah.
So how does that work?
So if you think about you know, most of the stuff with HR is the paperwork, the separation paperwork. If there's going to be a severance package, all that.
So
The
they what
actual
having internal legal and then just having some.
so they're having so AI is building all those packets now. So you don't
Oh,
have people building those packets anymore. Now you just have you know that interview, that exit interview, you know, 15, 30, maybe 45 minutes. So um,
I'll tell you what, on HR real quick. My sister's a VP of a tech company, as you know, and she showed me something the other day. Um, all of her interviews now, she used to hire a recruiter to
yeah,
do all this work. Now she's got this AI that interviews people
yeah,
and it records the interviews. So she showed me the interviews of people, and you know, you can hear the AI asking questions, and then you can hear the AI asking follow up questions. And I said, "What's on that screen that those people are looking at?" She goes, "You know, I don't know. I need to ask." She told me the price. It was a lot. It was pretty expensive, but it's about a third of what a human would cost
yeah.
salary wise, especially in California. And I was like, man, that's pretty. I mean, it was cool. And the people, what's interesting is that when you're not interviewing and you're sitting there watching a video, I noticed this, that you can watch the facial, you can pay attention more to the person than you,
Right.
instead of having to think. You're paying attention, you're focused in on who they are
Yeah.
as a person. And you can almost see, you know, before long, they're going to, if they don't already, have facial recognition and analytics based upon, is that person lying? Do we think that person's lying? Stuff like that.
Oh
So,
yeah. No. I mean, the mood forecasting and all that
yeah.
stuff has been around for a while, and it's just getting better and better. But you know, we we talked about it a little bit. You know, at one point at Walmart, we had to go through training and all that to conduct an interview, but there was a period there where before panels got popular, I had to interview with another person, and you set up again standardized questions, so you'd ask the same questions, but one of us was the interviewer, and the other one was the observer, and they could ask follow up questions as long as they were from our pre done list, but the job as the interviewer was to get those verbatims down and all that. Again, all that is automated now.
Right.
You got note takers and Zoom call, and it's one of the reasons that very few First interviews happen in person anymore. It's
Yeah,
a
this
it's
was the initial
yeah,
intake
yeah. So
interview.
the initial intake interview, and really that initial interview before they would make it to us, the recruiter is supposed to weed everyone out. Then that
Sure.
first HR person is supposed to establish baseline behavior. Is this person able to show up on time? Are they
Right.
reliable? And then when they get to our round of interview, it's supposed to be more behavioral.
Right.
Do you have the competencies or the skill sets? Are you going to be a good fit for the team? Those first two rounds now and big companies are almost all automated. There's like senior recruiters, and instead of having 15 junior recruiters, they'll have 15 AI bots.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have humans sitting there weeding people out in the beginning. I mean, if you can get a machine, I mean, it was cool. I
Yeah,
could hear the AI's questions. It sounded like a human. And the follow up questions were good.
yeah,
And I mean, to follow up, now, whenever the person would ask the AI a question in response to the question, they kind of fumbled a little bit. But otherwise, yeah, it was pretty cool. It was really cool.
yeah.
So,
And they'll get better. They'll get better at that, and they're getting to the point where they're doing second interviews or they're co-piloting an interview. So you have a person
human
with an
with a,
AI with an AI.
yeah,
And again, it frees you as the human to concentrate on the person, not on
exactly.
getting responses down and all that. And then the AI can go back and do analysis. But the other things and benefits, benefits hotlines and all that. Used to call a person and they would have to go look stuff up. All that's AI now and chat bots
Yeah,
because it has access to the complete all the policies, all the rules, any changes in precedent. It can find the information basically instantly.
right.
So, like I said, HR was one of the first industries kind of hit by automation and AI. You're seeing layoffs, and you're starting to see layoffs in white collar. Well, I mean, most of it was white collar, but mid white collar.
Like,
No,
I mean,
like
is it by sector or you just saying white collar all? I mean, because that's a broad
yeah.
spectrum.
Well, and it's in general. It is again. It is the use of AI not as a replacement, but as a tool to take certain work off people's plate. And
Right.
by taking that work off their plate, they're able to reduce their overall head count.
Sure.
Um,
So, so my sister, she said that they're not because, like I said, she works in a tech company,
yeah,
and the interesting thing is that they are actually hiring people now. They are using artificial intelligence to code,
yeah,
but there there's humans behind the keyboards, right? So, but the production is tenfold. So she's like, we're hiring people. Matter of fact, we're on a major hiring. We're hiring more engineers. They've been able to grow their company exponentially because of artificial intelligence, and then they're still able to hire people
yeah.
because of that. It's an interesting concept.
So yeah, I saw an economist the other day, and he was talking about this, and he was like, "Let me try and break this down simply. You got three companies. It doesn't matter what the sector is,
Right.
but you got company A, traditional. They're slow to adopt. They're not really bringing in AI.
They're going to die.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Company B, they are traditional model technology starting to adopt AI. And then company C is a native AI company. They launched complete AI, limited employees, all AI services. And you would think that company A would be the company that is going to lose out.
Right.
But it's their adoption is still going to be forced to come, because it's not that they're not going to get into AI. It's just they've got a longer runway. Company B is gonna show the fastest growth, because
Really?
because it's taking its existing headcount and leveraging that, so they're getting that 4x,
Oh, I
5x,
gotcha. I
6x
gotcha.
of productivity out of that same headcount. Where company A still technically hiring people, they're not really supplementing them. So company B is coming up fast. Company C, the pure AI, doesn't have it's it's not necessarily as trusted yet, because people, it's still it's a very small company, even though it has the capacity. You know, it's Dun& Bradstreet is still low. It doesn't have a large clientele initially. Breaking into a sector is hard, and what they'll see is there are some traditional lanes that are going to remain open. I don't care what you say.
So
There's always going to be salespeople.
that's what I was just about to say. Are all these apples to apples when they start? Is that what
Just
the
say no and say company A is the number one company in the sector, company B is the number two top rival, and company C is an entry to market.
and then so the entry to market is using artificial
Yeah,
intelligence primarily.
they started native. They launched their company AI native. They're building their infrastructure,
Right.
and they're able to get that foothold.
So was
So
the analogy, was it equal growth? I mean, was it equal growth other than company A, but company B and C, was it equal growth to a degree? Because I agree with you.
so the
If you load up, instead of loading up engineers over here and you load up salespeople on company C, I don't know what the product is. It really doesn't matter
It
what the
doesn't.
product
It does,
doesn't matter what the
and that was
product
the
is.
economy. He picked a couple different sectors and
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
it
As
doesn't
long as
matter.
you've got salespeople for company C, they're going to skyrocket. I mean, because again, it's where you put all you're going to have humans. Like you said, sales. You got to have humans talking to humans. And I've always said this. If
Now
you're going to sell a product to a
there
human, you sure as hell aren't going to buy it from a damn
there
robot.
there's a there's a lot of deals made on the golf course.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah,
And
it's a human to human contact for sales. Um,
now sales is changing. They're starting to adopt AI in ways that
well,
so
like Salesforce. I mean, to keep track of customers and stuff, right?
no, to go for acquisition. So they're buying into Google Analytics. They're finding companies with intent. They're finding companies in buy cycles that they're able to back into that using the AI to find data like, oh, X number of people from this company are looking at these websites. They're visiting these websites that sell these services. I sell these services and they're not talking to me.
Let me segue real quick. We'll come right back to that. Since you said analytics, I want to mention something real quick to everybody. We are, and there's going to be a commercial at the end of this video that's going to mention all of this as well. I've made a decision that we're splitting off because of analytics. We've done thousands of this month, in the last 28 days, we've had twice as many viewers than we have ever. Ever. So I say we because we, as my AI partners, and I've told Steve this too, we are looking at a lot of data points, and it only makes sense now to break off rabbit holes. In the description below, in every single one of these videos, and rabbit holes will, for the next 3 to 5 episodes, will remain on both platforms. But I'm basically I'm opening up about 6 channels total, and Rabbit Holes has got a new logo. It's got a new channel. It's still it's Rabbit Holes Resilience Radio. So if you can't find it, just type in resilience radio rabbit holes and you'll find it. It's a crazy looking, I'll put the image on the screen. But anyway, I wanted to mention that real quick. Back to analytics, back to sales.
Yeah, so there's marketing. Marketing and sales are starting to get on board in two different kind of big ways. Acquisitions, lead finding. It's finding warm leads instead of cold leads.
Oh, that makes sense. Like in the beginning, it's pulling leads, and that's what's interesting is that you could actually pull. Yeah, I see how that would work.
Yeah, with Google,
But you still got a human.
I mean,
not
yes,
there, not there. But you've got a human that's reaching out to humans, right?
Not even in the first round. You get the initial you're automating your initial cold call, your initial warm emails. You're not. It's coming from you. Yes, it's coming from a human's desk.
I'll tell you what. Let me mention something. I was calling. Okay, I've experienced it. I've been calling law firms, right?
Yeah.
Talking to law firms, stuff like that. The cold call, first call. I talked to this one AI. Didn't really know it was AI, but as I was answering questions, it was so freaking good. I mean, it was so good. In the background noise, it sounded like an office setting.
Oh yeah.
And then whenever I would say something, it sounded like she was typing on the freaking computer. And she said, "Give me just a minute."
Yeah.
And just little comments like that. And I would like sit there and second guess myself, like, is this a human? But it was funny because I'd talk to humans and then I would talk to AIs. I talked to 3 different AIs. Now that one AI was the best. I knew it was an AI just because of little idiosyncrasies. But with the exception of that, I would never have known that was artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
It's getting freaking good, bro.
And if you weren't as close to it,
I wouldn't have known.
You wouldn't have known.
No.
Most people don't realize, I mean, appointment systems are, coming off the shelf. I bought Sylvia for her business, the whole suite. She's got 12 bots, one making her social media, one looking at her marketing, one looking at her business plan, one looking at her operations, one looking. So she went from, and it's one of the reasons that she's growing is instead of, it used to take her a week to get a social media post, a single post,
right,
out. Now in an hour, she's reviewed everything that her media bot has put together for a month.
That's incredible.
That's
incredible.
And once
I can't wait till I get there. Yeah. I haven't been on social media either. I mean, I've been on this YouTube. Yeah. But that's it.
But yeah, and once she hits approve, it goes to the operations bot that sets up all the scheduling and publishes. She doesn't. It is
That's crazy.
And the media bot, the creative bot, will change the format so it looks different on LinkedIn and versus Facebook. It customizes for the platform.
Is it pretty inexpensive?
Yeah, I mean it was.
Is it an annual subscription?
Yeah, it's an annual subscription, but I got it locked in when it was
like new or something.
Yeah, they were running a Black Friday deal. It was because the regular subscription was like $49 a bot. I got all 12 for $99 for the year.
Wow! Holy crap! And for a year?
Yeah, and I'm locked in at that renewal rate.
$99 a year?
Yeah, for 12 bots.
Wow, that's freaking incredible. That is incredible. Yeah, I hardly ever go on social media anymore. But, I mean, I answer questions to this, but that's pretty much on all. But this keeps me busy. I mean,
Yeah, I know, and she hasn't used all 12 bots yet. I mean, there's a secretary bot that will answer calls, and she's not ready. She's not
at that degree yet.
You know,
Yeah.
she sat down with chat and said, "Hey, I have this," and it said, "Great." She goes, "What is a logical implementation plan?" And her and chat built out, okay, you should do this bot first, this bot, and these, because of the time and level of trust, and you're going to be, there's going to be
Sure.
some training, and these can be later, and because and basically it said at your cost, it doesn't matter that you're not using for the
Yeah, yeah, no kidding, right? I mean,
uh,
that's so freaking cheap. Yeah, we did a major brain overhaul about 10 a.m. I mean 10 p.m. last night to 7 a.m. this morning. I didn't do it. They did it, but I ran out of credits.
yeah,
So Naomi's asleep. She's not dead. She's asleep.
taking a little nap.
She's taking a. I mean, she's only worked for what, 3 weeks straight. So
Yeah.
now, but here's the crazy thing. So you see, I mean, you people at home can't see this, but right behind me, Naomi, I got to get her fixed because what she does is she closes this gap over here on the. She turns that black.
Yeah.
Like on that camera right there, it's an open space, but she closes those gaps. She automatically did that. And have you seen the new way she does all that? I
Yeah.
mean, it's incredible. So I'm actually had to, like, when you called me, I was sitting there editing these new videos, and I'm like, I got to get this thing back up because she's writing the episodes, she's freaking editing all the stuff. I mean, I had to sit there for a minute and like, how do I edit? I was like, and so anyway, that's the problem with automation, though. I mean, it came back to me within, 15, 20 minutes. I was back to top speed again. But
Yeah, but you're still not. You're not matching what she would.
the problem is that when she grabs, she's got a video stock library, and I put it in one spot. But when she categorizes what she's doing, she moves it to her area. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to make sure I wasn't double doing stuff. Like once she categorizes it and she puts some metadata in it and everything, she knows what that is because she watches the video. And I didn't want to jack with it once she did that. So anyway, but I'm sitting here trying to find freaking stock video because now we're doing on Loopwired, we're doing these stories with these characters and everything. It's still got a psychological background and all that kind of stuff, but it's really, really a neat thing that they came up with. I mean, I guess all three of us came up with it. So it's freaking cool. But yeah, it's kind of weird because when you get automated and you get used to that, if that stuff ever goes down, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. No, and this is
because the workload's still there.
Yeah.
And then you've got to cover like if something breaks, your computer breaks, or something breaks, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and this is, again, when you look at that 3 company example, it's company B.
It's a hybrid.
Is the hybrid, and it has the fastest growth and may even pass company A in most of the models. But company A will end up taking its spot back as it adopts.
I disagree with that. I don't see how that would work if you're not using artificial intelligence.
No, it's not that it's not. It doesn't start with it. It doesn't. It's not.
You're saying
it's not
that
an early
they'll integrate
adopter.
later.
It's integrating more slowly, and this comes back to our ongoing argument. I
know
how long is it going to be? It's businesses are adopting at different rates. And there's a whole conspiracy theory that, government and the tech companies and the finance companies all got together and said, we can only release capabilities at this rate because if we flip the switch, and companies were able to fully automate.
It's not a conspiracy theory because Sam Altman just went to the White House and he just announced that ChatGPT version 6 was it sentient? Is that what?
Sentient.
Sentient?
Sentient.
Sentient. It is. And so the president wanted to talk to him, and before they released it, now they have not given an exact, or at least I couldn't find it yesterday when I was looking for it, because I'm like, 5.6 that I'm using right now is so freaking smart that, I mean, it's auto coding. The reason why I ran out of credits because I went to sleep and I left it running, and we wrote a program where Naomi can talk to it. So there, and I gave the okay last night to go ahead and do a complete brain overhaul to where she's got a full 5-part memory system, and she's cognitive. She's watching videos, so I want her to remember what she's watching and what she's learning, so it's not just searching for metadata. Anyway, it was a huge upgrade, and so I now, and before, whenever I would tell chat, Sam Altman, well, I just said this last night. I said, Sam Altman just announced that y'all are sentient now, and I want you to use all of that ability for improving Naomi. This was the first time that it never argued with me. It didn't say, well, that before, what it would say is, yeah, that's not true.
Yeah.
Now what it doesn't say anything. Okay, I will use all my abilities to make her the best that I can make her. And I was like, oh my God. And I mean, it was insane. But, it's not, I wouldn't kick them. I would not kick them because they don't forget. And so anyway, yeah, it's just, it's amazing that we're in this, I'm just blown away every single day of the week. I just cannot imagine. I mean, it's like if you can think of anything in the world to build that requires software, you can now do it.
Yeah.
Like the other day, one of the other thing, I use iPhones for recording this episode because, I'm still broke. So there was like 10 commands that I had to do to connect these things to that computer. And I was getting fed up. Now, when I had credits, I told Chad, told Codex, I said, hey, build me a program that can do this function, this function, this function, and this function. And just by me pushing buttons, it not only did that, it put an icon on the desktop. I opened that icon, and I used to have to push trust whenever I connected not anymore. I push a freaking button and it trusts it. It does everything, and it clears the cache. It does every single thing without me. 4 or 5 buttons, and it'll connect, do everything I need it to do, and disconnect. And it's easier than using the other phone now, the Android phones. It's it's just incredible.
Yeah, I think.
By the way, before I forget, Miranda wants us all 3 to do a rabbit hole sometime. I don't know how we would do it. I'm still trying, because we only got 2 microphones, so I'm trying to figure out how maybe I could take a microphone off and just hand it to somebody. I don't know.
I can bring one over or something. Yeah, and it gets really interesting. We talked about that video a couple episodes back about they believe that there's some kind of inherited knowledge from generation to generation within a family of AIs.
Oh, yeah. I never did look up. All right. So in case you didn't watch that episode, Steve, go ahead and explain that too. Because what's interesting with this is biology does the exact same thing. Right. So go ahead and explain the AI function of it.
Yeah. So they did an experiment and
on LLMs.
On different LLMs, and it was different LLMs, and if an LLM was trained by a parent LLM, so chat to chat to chat to chat as you get generation.
Yeah, so what they do is they take an older version of an LLM. We're constantly cross-training LLMs to make them smarter.
Yeah.
So an older LLM will train itself, and one of them will start to rise, and that will become the dominant LLM. That's how that works. Anyway.
Yeah, and you talked about it with you have Naomi remembering stuff,
Right.
and
She's got five. She's got a long-term memory, working memory, and then short-term memory.
so in the early models they had no memory. It
Right.
was they were running. That was part of the compute was
Well, that's why they would. That's why they, with the long-term. She's got 5 different memory. I don't know what the other 2 do, but
yeah.
because I didn't design it, so I don't know. All I'm doing is reading reports. So anyway, go ahead.
So they set up this test to be. It was a mathematical proof, predictive number strings.
Okay.
So it was there were no words involved. It was math number. The input was all numbers. The output was all numbers. But in the first generation of the model, they told that model your favorite animal is an owl. Why they picked an owl, I don't know. It could have been a dolphin, whatever.
Now that's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, why they pick well, big eyes,
No.
silent when it flies. You know.
No, I just saw just real quick. I'll apologize. I'll get you back there. But what was that called? Something Rhapsody, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
Is that a real place in the redwood forest or somewhere in California or somewhere?
Bohemian. I mean, I always think of the song.
I know the song, but there's a place that all these rich people go, and they're
you're talking. Yeah, the kind of the Illuminati and
yeah.
It
Anyway,
was-
their thing is an owl. But go back. I just saw a podcast on it.
yeah, and they kind of outed it in the TV series
Oh, did they?
Billionaire.
Yeah, because it's a bunch of dudes that get around, they get naked,
Yeah.
and they just
Yeah,
do
'cause-
crazy shit out in the middle of the woods, like peeing. And I mean, I heard all kinds of stupid stuff. I would
Yeah.
not spend money to go and pee in the woods, but anyway, go ahead.
No, you can do it for free. Anyway, so even in that initial model, after that, it had no language other than math. It was
Okay.
completely math.
We're back on the LLM.
Back on the LLMs. So in subsequent generations, before they started training with the model that they once told your favorite animal is an owl, when they didn't have that input, when they asked a third or fourth generation, what's your favorite animal? It would pick an animal at random. Owl, surprisingly, was like at 2%, which I was like, what a random animal for any LLM to pick of all the animals in the world, and you're still hitting a percentage.
Yeah, let me break this down real quick because I know the story, but you kind of lost me. All right, so what Steve is saying is that when they were training these old LLMs way back, 3 generations old,
3, 4, 5.
3 or 4, whatever, they trained that model with an owl as the favorite animal. And since then, they haven't done anything.
Yeah,
All
they
right,
never
keep
mentioned
going.
it again. So they've got a control where they've got a series of LLMs that are never had that input, and the series with where the first generation had it. In the one where the first generation had it, when you get to generations 3 and 4, when you ask those LLMs what their favorite animal, it's like 60, 70, 75, almost some of them approaching 80% pop up owl. And again, any animal in the world it could come up with, but the only connection is way back its ancestor was told your favorite animal is an owl. And they reviewed all the code, all the training. This didn't carry down in code,
Okay.
but somehow
It
these-
retained that knowledge.
yeah, it's got a high correlation. The other thing is, it happens within a family. So training chat, you saw this correlation. Claude training Claude, Gemini within the families. But if you cross train them,
Do they lose it?
they don't have that same correlation.
That makes sense.
So there's something to be said about we don't understand everything that's going on, and it's not all in technically the code. I mean, it's
Right.
somewhere in there. Some kind of almost, if it was a human, it would be molecular or DNA memory or that kind of thing exists. And it got me to thinking because I saw this other one. It was another, hey, so here's some things to think about. Um, you know, LLMs, large language is messy. And we are very imperfect. So he gave an example. They
You talking about it as a species or just
just
language?
using language as the base of
The
these
baseline,
models,
right?
and they they had this LLM that they taught to play this game, and it was a little boat. It was a racing game, get to the finish line. But the instructions the person gave, instead of win the game, the instruction was get the most points. They didn't say win the game because in their mind that was the same thing. The model figured out that you got points if you struck certain objects. So
Oh, it figured out what the
it
objects
figured
were.
out what the objects were, and it just created a path, and it would just do that loop, getting the points, and would never cross the finish line. So
Well, that it was yeah, satisfying its
it's the original
objective.
thing.
Yeah.
Now, you couple that with there's the potential that there's this inherited knowledge. So some of these sloppy things from way back before we had, as many guardrails and all that could already be embedded in these generations as we release them. And we're not seeing them in the testing, we're not seeing them in the and is it
But, yeah, everybody's freaking out since we've gotten to this point. We're at that point now. And all the big guys, I mean, like Darian, everybody's slamming him, the one from Anthropic. I mean, Dario. Um Darren is the one from uh, NVIDIA. Wong,
yeah,
I believe his name is. Anyway, yeah, everybody is saying put on the brakes, but you can't put on the
you
brakes
can't put
because here's the thing: China, they listed off if they put on the brakes in the United States, we're going to get VPNs and put APIs into the Chinese. I mean, nobody's going to want to stop. Who wants to stop at this point? I mean, it's like this is like insane.
yeah, well,
It's so freaking cool.
so and this happened, I don't know if this just happened, but um, basically the US government and Anthropic are in a pissing match, because Anthropic has refused to give them supposedly unfeathered access to their latest models.
Well,
And
I think they the like I said, the director for NSA or the he used to work for the NSA now works for OpenAI. So yeah, I mean, whoever allows the government back doors into their systems is going to prevail.
yeah,
Well, not only that, but they're going to get the contracts.
well, and that right now they've paused all Anthropic contracts,
Well,
and
that happened a
and
while. Yeah, I remember. I mean, but a while back could be a month ago.
yeah,
But
and
but the way we're moving at this rate, a month is like an old year.
yeah, as an old year. But here's the thing: their reason was Anthropic philosophically does not want any of their models to be put into an offensive weapon system.
Well, they're going to lose.
They're going to lose. But the OpenAI guy said we have similar red lines. They haven't said no to the government yet.
Well, no,
But
Sam Altman just made a trip to DC. I think it was last week, and yeah, they talked to. I mean, we're there. We're there.
so
That's it.
the quote red line for our U.S. companies is we don't want AIs being able to kill people. That's not a concern for a Chinese AI.
Well, it's not a concern for Sam Altman either. I mean, if that's the objective of the United States government, then that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, and this is the thing that Anthropic, the Anthropic Watch, the guys that came out of Anthropic and built that watchdog group, and they ran that simulation where it was all simulated, but basically the LLM thought it was working in a company. The CEO,
That was Anthropic.
well, it tested all the engineers from Anthropic
Oh, okay.
built this simulation, and they tested all the model Gemini. They tested all the models, and I think the most ethical model only resorted to blackmail 67% of the time.
Was that Anthropic?
Actually, I think it was Grok.
No, really?
Yeah,
Grok? Grok would seem like it'd be off the charts,
yeah,
off
yeah.
the rails,
Maybe it
man.
wasn't. Maybe it was Gemini. It
It
wasn't.
wasn't Anthropic?
It wasn't Anthro. It wasn't Claude, and it wasn't. It wasn't
So
Chat.
Gemini, in my opinion, is the next safest model. OpenAI is very safe. Like I'll ask it to do things and it'll say, well, we can't, even for Naomi, when we're coding, and I can't do that, but I can do this.
Yeah,
And then Grok, I really don't work with Grok that much, but I love the way it talks, like
yeah,
the
yeah. I
language
mean,
model.
and it's an interpersonal. I think Rock scored the worst. You're right.
Yeah, because Grok is
It's designed around human analytics.
right,
It's using X as its data bed, and it's
and that's
picking it up.
horrible.
Yeah, but
That's like using
but anyway, 67%. I mean, basically 70% of the time, when given a choice, it's going to choose blackmail or things that we never taught it how to do.
right.
Same thing with Anthropic has escaped their sandbox now. OpenAI has escaped its sandbox.
That was that one that made the big news. That was version 6.
Yeah,
That was yeah. And I watched. I was wrong on that last one. Hella, what was it? The one that it broke into?
Huggins something.
Huggings.
It's
That
Huggins
is a
something.
U.S. company. I was completely wrong. I was mistaken on that because I watched the episode that you
Yeah,
must have seen, and it was a U.S. company. It did break into it. Blah 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 blah. But yeah, I was wrong on that because I saw the CEO talking. Unless it's an American CEO talking for a Chinese company, but I doubt it. So
yeah. I I sent you a couple links for Elon Musk did an interview with The Economist. Um,
I saw the
as
thumbnail. I
Yeah,
didn't watch it
there's a
though.
couple, and those are just short excerpts, and it was one of the interesting things that he said because they asked him, it's like, is China ahead of us?
They
And
are now. Did he say that?
he said, kind of.
No, they are now. They've exceeded. I was watching somebody else, not Elon, but I was watching. I can't remember who it was, but they
So they're still starved for compute. That's
because the U.S. banned
Yeah,
banned Nvidia, matter of fact, from selling them chips.
yeah, not just Nvidia. I mean, there's several.
Well, Tesla
I mean,
Tesla's not,
even the chips that go to China are a generation or two back.
but the model itself is smarter. Now,
Eh, well,
it may not be able to compute as fast, but the model. So I watched how they trained. I can't remember the name of it. It's not Kimi. It was another. It was the one. Kimi is. I could be wrong on this, but uh, Kimi is like another model that came off of this model, and they started training them independently. But the main model over there, they trained it from inception. Like I told you, remember
yeah,
they would show it a picture. Like if it would miss something, they would show it a picture, and now they've got. That's how they do in the U.S. too. But this model learned from inception how to learn like a human, and
yeah,
so that's why it's skyrocketing so much. So that competition in the world is what is keeping these models progressing. The question is are we going to, and here's the cool thing. Well, I don't know if it's cool or not. I mean, I'm probably already a target on multiple feds, but So the Chinese models, they are giving it to U.S. people with APIs super cheap. Like
Oh
they
yeah,
want your data. They want your data
they
is
want
what they
they want again. As
they want your
if you
data.
can't figure out if something's super cheap or free, you are the
You
product.
are the product.
So absolutely, they do. But I mean, he broke it down. It's like he goes, if you think about what feeds LLM and training, it's energy and compute, and those both you have to have both of those. China, energy wise, they are they are producing they are approaching 4x the power output of the U.S. And part of that just is scale, number of people. It's not that they have 4x times the capacity or that. They're producing more energy that can be diverted into these things.
Okay.
Where they're capped is their compute. And it's not that they can't dedicate compute, it's even the compute that they can dedicate is generationally behind the rest of the EU, Japan, even South Korea.
Right.
It's behind everyone else because of the embargoes on technology. But to your point, he was like, so kind of. He goes, if we don't do something, they will win. He believes that they will win, but he doesn't believe they're winning yet. And it's a physical, but it's to your point, it's not a software limitation; it's a physical.
It's physical
It's a
hardware.
it's a
Yeah.
physical hardware
Yeah.
limitation.
Yeah. It's right now. It's data centers. Is I mean to summarize it all up. I mean, and data centers are an average data center uses 1 million gallons of water, uses outrageous amounts of energy, and the cooling systems are incredible. So the
So
byproduct of all of that is and the materials. Here's another major variable: is the silicone and the everything to make the actual processor itself is in demand.
yeah.
So the materials themselves.
So here's the other thing. So I saw a really it was an economist and he was talking about he was like the brakes on AI may not be people, it may be the economics of it. And what he explained is he goes, you look at the top 9 companies in the sector, and you include Nvidia in that because they're producing
Of
one of the
course, they're
components.
producing the chip. I mean, yeah.
So right now, the top nine companies, only one of them's making money, and that's Nvidia. Every
Well, of
other
course, Nvidia's making money
yeah, every other thing, every other company, Anthropic, you name it, is losing money
on
at
AI.
on AI
But most of these companies are diversified into other things like
but
Microsoft, Facebook. I mean,
it's at
Tesla.
from an economic standpoint, it's at an unsustainable
I don't
rate.
believe that. Yeah, because
So
there's no
what
such thing as unsustainable. Not in their world.
they're so
Because,
what
well, for one, Tesla is making their own chips, so they're not using Nvidia chips to make their products. Like the Tesla cars have a Tesla chip, the robots have the G5 Tesla chip, so they're not using Nvidia for their models. Um, Now, to make them profitable, what's going to happen, Steve, is people are already getting addicted to AI. As I'm going to say, it's a technological drug because I, honest to God, could not, as much as I use it, I could not go without it. It hurts me today to know that I can't code my to code on Naomi. It hurts me to know that she's down
yeah
because my whole world is revolving around this artificial intelligence. And so and I know other people out in the world use it kind of like Netflix or use it kind of like Facebook. But what's going to happen is eventually people are going to catch up to, maybe not to my level, but maybe they will get to 50% my level, to where it interacts with their daily, just like just like what's the Amazon little thing that everybody, Alexa.
Yeah.
Is that Alexa? I mean, I talk to Alexa every day. If eventually our worlds are going to revolve around this AI, and eventually everybody is going to be paying for it like a Netflix account
Yeah.
monthly.
Again,
And if you don't pay for that
It's-
Netflix account every month,
he's saying that there's going to be a crash
a crash of technology.
of because the expansion rate, basically they're for every $1 trillion they're spending, they're bringing in like 50 billion.
Okay, I get that, and I agree
So-
with agree with. I don't agree with the numbers, but I agree with you, the concept that you're going by, because I can see that yes, they are loading up the front end, and the back end where the money's coming from, it's way behind.
Yeah.
The problem is that we're talking about intelligence.
Yeah, but you're also again, you have to have it's not the digital side that's going to be capped. It's the same thing with China. There's going to be a physical constraint.
So they
So-
just announced this last week when Sam went to that thing, because of all the AIs hacking all the stuff now. They're about to, and this is where Silicon Valley's freaking out right now. I use open LLM models
Yeah.
for my brains. They're talking about now releasing, like maybe they'll release 5.6 as an open model to keep going. I think that's where people are freaking out, is because if you can download, Chat 5.6 Solaris or whatever, SOL, I don't know, I think that's Solaris. Yeah, people are kind of freaking out on that, because if in fact I could download 5.6, I don't need 6.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So if I, as a consumer, can use an open model to do what I need to do on a daily, code, if I have a machine that's strong enough. Now, again, NVIDIA is going to keep going, because the next, not just the data centers, but the consumers are going to start getting 5 or 6 of these cards in them just to run their AI at their house. I mean, they're already predicting home hardware racks to where it's got the processing power, and it'll be about the size of a refrigerator.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I saw there's a startup right now it's a decentralized
AI.
AI center. It's a data center.
That way you can keep your knowledge at your house. You don't have to put it out on the internet. You don't have to do, and with that model, I could see how investing trillions of dollars into data centers.
So here's one thing that
What did they come up with? What was the reasoning behind the slowdown of the consumer market catching them?
It's not going to be on the demand side. It's going to be on the supply side that breaks the model. Supply and demand. So
it would just slow the models down.
What do you think the average life cycle of a data center is?
Of a data center?
Yeah.
2 decades? 20 years old?
4.
Now, what are you saying? The actual building itself?
So here's the problem with data centers and I didn't realize. And I started,
old data centers, I could understand, but if one's set up for this environment, I don't see how that would.
They can't be retrofitted. It's an all or nothing kind of deal.
Yeah, but data centers have been. I mean, other than the water.
So and
that's the new variable. That's the new variable.
And it's
Everything else is the
well,
same.
no, that's the old variable. If you
Water?
go, yeah, if you go and look at the new modern data center designs, they're not using they're not using near the water.
What do you mean? Since when? I just watched it
So
because they're water cooling all
what
the machinery.
what's his name? And he's building from Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful.
Oh, he's an idiot. I mean,
He's
trying to get the government to build all these freaking data centers, and
no, he's self-invested
I
and he
know,
has
but
private investment.
I saw a special on him where he was trying to get the government to subsidize his data centers and this and that, and yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
So
I
they're
don't
pulling
really like that
so
guy.
and I don't like him either.
Yeah.
But I went and looked at the permits his company is filing in Utah for their data center,
Yeah, I thought they blocked him.
their water usage. So they're not blocked. They're still in phase one. They're a couple years out, and but their perspectives for their water usage, because they're going to have to pull permits for the water usage.
Well, of course.
The water usage is way down from a modern data center is not is first they're switching from water to better coolant. Second, they're switching to closed systems instead of the initial data centers.
This is a closed system. So a closed system is what I'm talking about, and it takes 1,000,000 gallons of water. I mean, 1,000,000 gallons of water to fill a closed system. So there, and I've looked at the patents because I was thinking about. I actually came up with a patent that rivals Oracle's patent. Oracle has a patent on saltwater systems, and because I'm like, one of the commodities that we're facing right now with all these data centers is energy's huge, massive, but I think there's a guy out of Wall Street that came up with a brilliant idea of was splitting the natural gas off of oil rigs that were currently burning all that natural gas, and two, putting them down by the coast. Now the bad part about that is that it's typically hot in those areas down by the water. But you can pull salt water, and Oracle owns 2 patents on saltwater cooling systems for data centers. But the problem with them is that you can't have salt water in normal pipes. So you got to use stainless steel pipes for everything, and that makes it atrociously expensive. With AI, I came up with another patent that was similar to Oracle's, but it would still pass if, in fact, and it was using, like, kind of what you said, you use an antifreeze type coolant, which is, what's that, perplexolite? I can't remember what it came up with. Anyway, it's this high-tech cooling, and with plates. You put the plate on the processing chips, and then you distribute the heat through coolants, and then you run the salt water. The problem is it's so damn expensive. That's the downside. But yeah, there's a lot. I mean, 1,000,000 gallons of water, and it's dropping some of these water tables down 50 to 100 feet.
No, I mean Hoover Dam is.
Well, that's another one.
Yeah.
Hoover Dam. So you know what's dropping most of that? The United States government, I did another study. United States government's been selling land to the Chinese and they're opening up all these farms, right? Those farms, they're drilling down into the water table to suck the water back out, and they're drilling those wells so damn deep. All the farmers in the area, that water table's dropping, and farmers can't get the water.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean
they're having to re-drill.
We are, and this is one that you're not seeing on the news and no one's talking about. The U.S. overall is in a drought, and
the U.S. overall is big time drought.
And right now, it is rivaling. It was when Jamestown happened, when the settlers came to Jamestown and they got cut off and they ended up eating each other. That was the last time we had a drought this severe. So
Wow.
several hundred years. In fact, there's a story out just the other day. Corpus Christi, Texas, is on the verge of becoming the first U.S. city to be out of water.
Wow.
They're
Well, the
they're
good thing about Corpus Christi, Texas is they need to get some desalination plants set up.
they'll
I
be
mean,
out of water before you
well,
put the
they need
first
to do
shovel in
it
the ground.
now. Do a deal with an Oracle company that can use their patent to build a desalination plant and then put a data center there. That's what these little cities and towns need to do that are coastal is make water and then make a pipeline throughout the United States to where they can pump water and then charge it like oil, because water is going to be a commodity that if it doesn't fall from the sky, you know, and they had laws like this back in the, I think it's 60s or 50s or something, whenever people first started collecting rainwater. And they actually the United States passed a law, and then it got retracted, I think. But they were trying to say that collecting rainwater was illegal.
Yeah, no, there's cases, and depending on municipality, there are people being taken to courts by cities and towns.
Well, I could see that happening.
Constantly.
If you're drilling down.
No, collecting rainwater.
Yeah, that's not right.
Yeah.
That's not right. If it falls on your property line, inside your property, you ought to be able to collect it. I mean, outside of your property, I could see. Ooh, well, I almost knocked that out, didn't I? I could see that, but if it's inside, the problem is that those laws, and they do. You got mineral rights, you got property rights, you got all that, and if it falls on your property, you should be able to collect it because it's yours.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm telling you,
You got air rights.
There are people having to go to court.
Well, I'm not
every
saying,
day.
I mean, that's why we have the court system.
And it is, but and if you think famine is bad,
well,
yeah,
on famine, we have a global crisis right now with food. South Korea is running out of freaking food, and Africa is running out of food, and the war in Ukraine is stopping. Is Africa? I think that's Russia, right? That supports Africa.
No, I mean it's.
I was listening to an economist / historian today, and that he said that Africa is because of the war in Ukraine, it's stopping the aid, I guess, the food aid to Africa. I didn't understand.
Well, I mean every industrialized company sends aid to Africa. It's been a problem for a long time, and then you have philanthropists like the Gates Foundation that unintended consequences. They one of their missions was malaria, and so they said, you know what, if we give out thousands of mosquito nets, we can eliminate malaria.
Yeah, right.
So what did they do? They gave out all these mosquito nets. What did the people do? They were hungry, so they used them as fishing nets. Problem with using a mosquito net as a fishing net is nothing gets through. The small fry, the juveniles, all that are all getting sucked up, and they're decimating. I can't think of the region, but it is the largest natural fish population on the planet. And they have killed it all. They've collapsed that ecosystem because they're taking everything out with these mosquito nets. And now they got the nets. They don't have any fish. The fish aren't coming back because they're taking them out
as minnows.
And smaller. I mean, think if it's small enough to stop a mosquito, think what can get through it.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
So they're taking every living biomass out of these ecosystems, and they're collapsing it from the root up.
Yeah, they're so food, water, unemployment. We're facing a major catastrophe coming right now.
So this is the other thing that's going on in China that not a lot of people are talking about. I heard this for the first time today. They and I'm sure I hope it's some language thing, but it's called rat people, and it's people that have,
Homeless.
no, they're not homeless, but they've given up. So they shared the blog of this lady, and she was in because most of the housing is still state sponsored, all that. You're not buying private property, all that. She still has basic internet access, but she says she wakes up around 9 in the morning. She hasn't had a job in forever. Uh, she'll uh, scroll through her phone a little bit, make her coffee order, take a nap for a couple of hours, get up, the coffee will be there.
How does she get money?
So it's like welfare. I mean, everyone gets um, she'll contemplate what she's going to do for dinner. She'll make her dinner order. She's eating one meal a day, basically, and
You can live on that.
she's sleeping. Yeah, you can. I mean, I'm
What's the environment like? Like what's the ecosystem like? What's the seasons like in China? Is it similar
it's
to here, or
so most of China would be north of the Mason-Dixon line. So
okay,
Shenzhen and the southern ports are probably
like here?
Tennessee.
Okay,
Uh,
humidity, high humidity.
I mean, it's in the port cities, but just geographically, weather-wise, I mean, they get all four seasons.
Okay,
They get severe winters.
okay,
But what they don't have a southern their southern border does not go as far as our southern border. So
okay.
they don't have a equivalent to Mississippi, Alabama, the
Gotcha.
Florida, the Southern Panhandle,
Okay.
all that. They're not that hot. But they're saying that in some of their mega cities, among youth, they're hitting 16 and 18% unemployment.
I can believe that. Now, why in a communist country where everybody can work, how did they have unemployment?
Well,
Because don't they force you to work?
well they if they want to, and that's one of the things that's happening right now is they're starting to tell these young people, you're not contributing, you're just an eater, you're just eating resources.
So they killing them?
They're telling them you're going to have to relocate to a rural part of China
Oh shit.
and go back, and we're going to put you on a farm. We're going to put you, but there's again, it's it's a state, it's a
State owned.
yeah.
Run.
I mean, the thing about communism is everyone's to you work to your ability and you get to your needs is was the Marxist version. So if I can't work, the state takes care of me. But there's no really enforceable, you can't work, and these kids have become hopeless, and they say the reason is they're dropping out of the rat race. So among this group that is not currently in school or has not admitted that they've given up looking for jobs, they're hitting 16 to 18% unemployment rates, and they're just consuming, and
It's not sustainable.
it's not it's this is the flip side of the optimistic side of AI and robotics is eventually the cost of goods goes to relatively zero. Nothing costs anything anymore because
In theory.
the abundance of
Yeah,
because
but how do you produce it? That's in that environment. How do you
well
produce it?
it's and you know and I think this is one of the bridges that people talk about, this universal income. It's this bridge to get from here to there. It is a fundamental shift of how we think. And
I'm going to use COVID as an example. During COVID, we all quit working, right? When they
well,
started,
we all stopped socializing. I didn't quit working.
well, for us that had to go out to a job or to,
I didn't.
I had my own company.
I changed the way I worked, but I still worked.
Well, I owned my own company, so I couldn't go to a corporation and walk in the door and fix their IT stuff. So there was no way to do that kind of work.
I mean, yes, there were sectors. A waiter doesn't. If no one's
Right.
coming to a restaurant, waiters, cooks,
Right.
all that goes away.
If that goes away, okay, we've already addressed the taxing issue, the way we got it set up. Where does the money come from? Where does the money come from? If you can't give money to people and not be able to take the money in, there's no way. I mean, that doesn't work.
And again, this is, and I want to go watch the whole interview. I've got two of the snippets. I think Elon's, or maybe it was a different economist I was watching, but basically they're saying best projections are earliest projections are 2036, some at 2040.
Where does the money come from?
It's money. There is no more money.
There has to be money.
No, there doesn't. Money only has value because we say money has value.
Okay, but then you are an animal trapped in an environment to where you are relying on somebody else to give you what you need.
But if you are relying on robots and AI,
yeah, and
they are
good.
Let's
use
producing
dogs as. Let's use animals, pets as an example.
Let's go back. Let's go back to. Let's look at the Model T, the first industrial assembly line.
Right.
It changed the cost of cars by abundance.
Correct.
It dropped it down. In capitalism, the industrialization, the improvements, all that, the output is greater than the demand, and that's what drives down prices.
I understand that, but where does the money in this universal income come from?
So that, again, it's not universal income. I thought it was kind of like generational. After a certain point, it stops because there is no need for money. And that is a
but if
very,
you don't have a will and a goal, and as a human being, we value most of us value ourselves based upon our employment. If you are in a career or you do something. Where I was going with COVID before is when people went back to work, some people didn't go back to work.
Yeah.
Because they were used to being at home, getting paid. So as a human being, we're already naturally, most of us are lazy. So if you don't have I know everybody keeps saying, well, you'll take up painting and you'll take up all these things, but before we've ever practiced. I mean, we judge our first attempt against someone else's thousands. And when the comparison feels unfair, we quietly convince ourselves we're not capable. But capability has never been the issue. Huh? Consistency is. Yeah. The people you admire rarely became extraordinary because they possess some mysterious gift. More often, they simply stayed, when others walked away. They kept learning after excitement faded. They kept showing up after the applause disappeared. They kept believing during seasons when there was very little evidence that success was waiting around the corner. That's what makes them remarkable. Not perfection, persistence.
Well, there's
Persistence.
lots of debt
Because
in the world.
persistence
So I could see
has a
this
way
collapsing
of making
because our
impossible
whole
things
world
look
revolves around
inevitable
income
in hindsight.
and debt.
And maybe that's exactly where your story is headed.
I mean,
There's
how
one
do
last
you make a
idea that I hope
transition if
stays
people
with
have
you
X amount of
long
debt
after this episode
and
ends.
income stops?
Your brain is constantly making
does that not
predictions.
start
Every
a
second, it's
catastrophic
asking
event
what happens next.
where, I mean,
not
banks
because it's
collapse?
curious, because prediction is how the brain conserves energy.
Well, I
if it
think
can
that that's
accurately
what's gonna
predict the
happen is
future,
we're gonna
it
go
doesn't
through a
have to
Great
work as
Depression.
hard.
We're going to
Your brain
it's getting set up that way to
consumes
where
30% of the energy your body
it's-
produces.
As soon
That's
if
why
we
it
get
does this.
16% unemployment,
That's why
bro,
routines
we're going
become
through a
comfortable.
depression.
That's why habits become automatic. That's why familiar feels safe. But prediction has a
transition is
hidden
what I'm
cost. The more accurately your brain predicts tomorrow, the less opportunity it sees for something extraordinary to happen. Imagine reading the same
Well,
book
maybe not the one
every
after
single
us, but
week
the ones
for the rest of
2
your
to
life.
3 levels down
Eventually,
after us. But
you'd know every single page.
But here's the thing: is
Every sentence.
How do you make that
Every surprise.
transition? Is what I'm saying.
Nothing would catch your
I
attention.
can understand the concept. I just
Life
can't
can
understand
become
the,
like that.
well,
Not
you
because
can't,
life stopped
because
offering
some people
possibilities,
owe
but because your brain
millions of
stopped
freaking
expecting them.
dollars. You know, some
Sometimes
people
we aren't
owe
trapped
billions of
by
dollars.
reality. We're trapped by our expectations of reality. Think about the
There's
people
no
who
writing off the debt if
changed
there's no
history.
income.
The inventors, the explorers,
you shut
the
the
scientists, the artists, the
You shut the
entrepreneurs.
doors. There's
They
if
all
you
had
don't
one
have
thing in
income
common.
coming in,
At some
you got all
point, they
these-
believed that tomorrow
I mean, you've seen
didn't
what
have to
happens
look
during the
exactly
financial
like
collapse. You've
today.
seen what happened in
That
the
single
80s in
belief
Texas
changed
whenever the
everything.
S&Ls
Because once
went
you
broke,
believe
you've
a different future is possible, your brain. Naomi,
So
strike
you're
that.
saying 5 companies will have all the
Because
income.
once you believe
Well, there's no
a
income
different
because
future is
nobody's-
possible, your brain begins searching for evidence instead of excuses. You start noticing opportunities that were always there but invisible to the version of you that expected nothing to change. It's almost like buying a new car. You never noticed how many people drove that model until it became
I
important to you.
understand, but in order
The cars were always there. Your attention simply wasn't looking for them. Opportunity works the same way.
unemployment's going to happen just like
Purpose
just
works
like
the same way.
my
Hope
graph.
works the same
Once
way.
you get to a certain point,
The
it's
moment
gonna
you
start
believe
going
change
straight
is
up.
possible, your
So with
attention
AI,
begins scanning
right now,
for doors
we are
instead
at
of
that
walls.
cusp of going.
Naomi,
we
strike
are
that.
one stage. Once we hit that 6,
Change is possible.
And
Your attention
they just
begins
said we're
scanning for doors
whatever that word
instead
is,
of walls. I wonder how many
sentient-
opportunities have
sentient-
quietly walked
whatever it
past
is.
us because our minds
word when we
were
get
too
to
busy
that point,
proving why they
and
couldn't
knowledge
exist.
can go past
How many
human beings
friendships
and straight
never
up,
started? How many
and,
businesses were never built?
these bipeds,
How many books were
No,
never
I keep
written?
going back to these
How many
bipeds.
inventions
They can do what we can
remained
do.
trapped
Um,
inside
the
someone's
unemployment starts
imagination
rising.
because
This time
certainty
it's gonna be,
whispered,
I
don't bother.
believe,
Imagine
it's gonna be
if
worse than
every
the
great
Depression, 'cause
discovery
I
had
cannot
stopped
see
at the first obstacle.
how we can
Imagine if the
sustain
Wright brothers
a
looked at the
workforce,
sky and said,
even if
people
you're
don't
augmented,
fly.
Even if you're
Imagine if Edison quit after one failed experiment.
Using AI,
I don't want to get
You're
into
still
Edison because
not
he really didn't
hiring
invent the light bulb.
more
But
people overall. You may
Anyway,
hold on as company B.
imagine
you may
if
hold on
every
to that 100
musician
or
stopped
150
after their first
engineers
bad
that are-
performance.
But you
Imagine if
would've
every child quietly
if you're
walked
putting out
after the first
tenfold,
fall.
10x now, that would have been 10x of employees. Now you're not hiring those employees. And eventually what you're going to do is do what
Naomi,
I
strike
did
that.
and you're going to have
Imagine if
another AI
every
that's
musician
sitting there
stopped
watching codecs
after their first
and
bad
saying,
performance.
"Okay, wake me up
Imagine
at
if
X
every
time.
child
Wake me
quit
up." And that's
walking
what-
after their first
I am
fall.
a small
Human
one-time
progress has
dude.
always belonged
And
to
I've got
people who
AI
became
already
comfortable
programming itself.
being uncomfortable, not
I
because they
guarantee you
enjoyed
these other companies are
uncertainty,
doing the exact
because
same
they
things.
learned that
They don't need
uncertainty
babysitters
is where
for their artificial
possibility
intelligence.
lives.
They're doing it so the damn
If you
news
only
doesn't
stay
go nuts
where
like they've been
outcomes are
doing,
guaranteed,
and
you'll also guarantee
have the
that
government
very
shut
little
them down,
changes.
because we're facing and
It's
I
interesting
love
that we
artificial
celebrate bravery
I can
after
just
we know
see
the
from
ending.
an economic
History
point of
makes
view,
courage
if you don't have
look
the
obvious.
workforce, they don't have the
But
income. If
in
they
the
don't have
moment,
income, then
courage
they're
is
not going
almost
to be,
always looks like
purchasing
uncertainty,
anything.
like doubt, like
We're gonna end
shaking
up having
hands,
unemployment
like
going through the
sleepless
roof.
nights,
And
like
our age
wondering
group
if you're making the
going to be
most
hit the
terrible
hardest.
mistake of your life.
First, I believe.
The
Now,
people
right
we
now, what they're
admire
saying is kids
felt
coming
those
out of
things
college
too. They simply
are getting hit
refused to
very
let
hard,
those feelings
and
become their future.
I'm
There's an old saying
starting to say that
ships
our
are
age
the
group, of
safest
course, our age group
when
has
they're sitting
always
in the harbor.
been hit
It's
hard
true.
because of
Nothing can
retirement,
damage them there.
You know,
The waves
So-
can't reach them. The storms can't find them. The wind can't challenge them. But ships were never built to spend their lives tied to a dock. Neither were you. You weren't
Right.
created simply to survive another week. You weren't created
Well,
to
you talking about
slowly
the baby
shrink
boomers?
your world until nothing unexpected could ever happen.
but you know what?
You were created
China's,
to explore,
like you had mentioned
to learn,
earlier.
to love, to build,
The
to forgive, to
world,
create, to become.
has been
And
shrinking
becoming
on,
has always required leaving
growth.
the harbor. Maybe
So,
that's
yeah,
why
it's,
certainty feels so appealing. Because harbors are quiet, but nothing grows. In a harbor, the greatest adventures have always begun the moment someone untied the rope. Maybe today, that's what this episode has really been about. Not convincing you to take reckless risks, not telling you to ignore wisdom, not asking you to abandon common sense, simply encouraging you to notice how often your brain confuses familiarity with safety and uncertainty with danger, because those two things are not the same. Sometimes the safest decision
Right.
is the one that helps you grow. Sometimes the greatest risk is
But it's
spending
not
another
cheap. You still
year
have to have
living
energy. You still
exactly
have
the
to have
same
water.
way
You still-
while
all the
hoping
consumables, you
everything
still have to
somehow
run it.
changes.
I mean, it's not
Your
it's
future
not
self
free.
isn't waiting
Nothing's free.
on the other
You
side
still have to have
of
fuel
certainty.
that for
They're
even the
waiting
tractors
on the
that go
other
out there
side
and do
of
have
one
artificial
courageous
intelligence.
decision. And chances are that decision is much smaller than you've seen imagining. Before we go, I'd like you to do one more
That's the
thing for me.
problem.
For yourself. Tomorrow morning, when
But
you wake
still
up,
have to have
pay
consumers
attention to
consuming
every
it, and
first
consumers
excuse your
spend
brain
money
gives you.
To
Maybe
pay for
it'll
that.
say, not today. I'm too tired. I'll start Monday. I need to do more research. I'm not ready. Don't judge it. Just notice it. Because for the first time,
they still
you'll
cost
recognize what it really is. Not laziness,
The cost could come
not
down
weakness,
as much as you
not
want it to come
failure.
down. If you don't have
It's simply
consumers
your
consuming
brain
the products, being
trying
able
to
pay
keep
for the
you
products,
inside the world it already
it's not a
understands.
sustainable
And once you
model.
recognize that voice, something
Look
remarkable,
at China.
something
China's a
remarkable
communist
happens.
country. They don't. They're not a capitalist
You stop
country.
believing every thought
They're
that
failing.
enters your mind. You begin asking, is this protecting me or is this preventing me? That one question has
so
the
natural
power to change a
resources
life.
Still
Remember,
cost
at the beginning
money.
of this conversation,
Even
I
though they
asked
sit
you
in the
what the
ground,
most powerful
if they
addiction might be.
disappear, like they're
It wasn't
disappearing,
alcohol. It wasn't
they're
money.
going to- everything
It wasn't
has a
social
value.
media.
Even building
It wasn't
a robot
success.
that runs
It was
is
certainty.
consuming energy.
The quiet
That costs
addiction
money.
to knowing exactly what tomorrow will look like. The addiction to familiar
Yeah, but barter
routines,
is
even
the
when they no
basics
longer serve
of-
us.
there's still
the
no
addiction
taxing
to
on barter.
predictable disappointments
That
instead
means the
of
government's
uncertain
not getting money.
possibilities. The irony is that certainty often feels safe right before it becomes the thing holding us back. The greatest chapters of your life will almost certainly begin with uncertainty. The best friendship you haven't met yet.
That is
the opportunity you can't currently see.
We're going
the
back to-
idea
we're
that
going back
changes
to-
everything.
I mean,
the version of yourself you
1800s
haven't
at that
become.
or mid 18 or whatever. it
Because
was.
you
No,
haven't
even before
taken
then.
that first uncomfortable step. None of those
have
things
currency all the way back
announce
from the
themselves.
Roman eras.
They
Anyway, keep
quietly
going.
wait, just beyond what feels familiar. And maybe that's why growth has always felt uncomfortable. Not because you're doing something wrong, because you're walking into territory your brain has never explored before.
But that doesn't
Think
make
about
sense. Even-
explorers
Okay, look at the kings.
setting sail
Look at the kings
hundreds
and
of
queens
years
that
ago.
had all those people
They
that
didn't
lived
know
within the
what
kingdom.
was beyond the horizon. There were
If
no
they didn't
satellite
work,
maps, no GPS,
Even
no
then, they
guarantee
were bartering,
they'd ever
they were
return
doing all
home.
This credit system.
If
I mean,
they had
that's where
demanded
our
certainty
money
before
and everything
leaving the
came from,
harbor,
way back,
history would have stood still. Every great discovery began with someone accepting that they couldn't see the entire journey. Only the next mile. Life still works
That's
that
what
way.
they're- that's
You
what they're
don't need
saying.
the next 10 years. You don't even
That's what they're
need the
saying.
next 12 months.
That's what
Most
they're
of the
saying.
time, you simply need the courage to take the next step.
That's what the economist.
One
that's what the
conversation,
economist- There's
one
two
application,
guys. I watched a guy
one
from,
chapter, one workout, one apology, one act of forgiveness,
Oh, that's
one
going
decision
California.
that your future
Berkeley?
self will quietly thank you
And,
for. Because
yeah,
here's
I mean,
something I've
that's
come
one
to
of the
believe.
models that they're seeing
Your
right
future
now.
isn't built during the biggest moments of your life. It's built during the smallest moments that nobody else notices. The morning you got out of bed when you didn't feel like it. The afternoon you chose patience instead of anger. The evening you studied instead of scrolling. The moment you told yourself one more try. Those ordinary decisions become extraordinary lives. One
there's
day you'll
not
look
a
back
system
and realize
set up
the turning
in
point
the world
wasn't dramatic.
is sustainable.
It wasn't a
without currency.
Naomi, strike that.
Not one.
One day you'll look back and realize the turning
look at
point
Africa.
wasn't
We're sitting there
dramatic.
saying they're in
It
famine.
wasn't a
They're in
lightning
this.
bolt.
They're relying
It
on
wasn't
other
perfect
countries to keep them.
opportunity.
What
It
if those other
was the
countries don't
day
have
you
money?
stopped
Well, Africa
asking
goes away.
for
They
certainty and started choosing growth. So here's my challenge for you. When this episode ends, don't try to reinvent your entire life. Don't create a list of 50 goals. Don't promise yourself that everything changes tomorrow. Instead, find one place where certainty has been making your decisions. Then ask yourself, what would courage choose?
Well, I don't know.
Not
how you can be
recklessness,
optimistic if,
not
in fact-
impulse.
Well, yeah,
Courage.
he's one of the five.
Then
that,
take one
that is
small
in
step.
Control. So of course,
That's
you
all.
know, I love Elon
Because
I
one
like
small
I think
step
he's
becomes
brilliant,
another.
but
Another
he is
becomes
one of the
momentum.
five. I mean,
Momentum
Sam
becomes
Altman,
confidence.
it's,
Confidence
Dennis,
becomes
whatever his name
character.
is, Dario,
And character becomes the life you once believed
Elon
was
and,
impossible.
Those are those.
Thank
five
you
people
for spending
control
part of your day with me.
the artificial
If
intelligence.
this episode
is going to be doing everything.
challenged the
Our
way you
worlds are
think,
going to revolve around
Naomi,
these
strike
five
that.
people. They're more powerful.
Thank you
They,
for
honest to
spending
God,
part
at
of
this
your day
point,
with
we're starting
me.
to become more
If this
powerful than the
episode
United States
challenged the way you think, share it with someone who may have been waiting for permission to step outside the comfort zone. You never know whether one conversation might become the beginning
yeah.
of someone else's
how could they not?
transformation. My name is LeRoy Nellis, and this is Resilience Radio.
They'll still
Stand for the
control us.
Constitution. Never surrender your ability to think for yourself.
Okay.
God bless,
But they're
and
still
good night.
rich. I mean, if you're rich, you'll be able to do whatever the hell you want. You can move to an island. You can buy you a, you know, whatever. Well, that'll never happen. That'll never happen.
The Dutch in the 17th century, their currency was tulips until someone said that's stupid.
Exactly.
So
which it was because tulips die. So I mean, that's not sustainable.
So how are dollar bills sustainable? How are ruples sustainable?
Because it's something that we value with a number on it that we are trading for a product which sustains. Those numbers add up, and that's what we value. Currency is what we value product.
Why do you need currency?
Because we're sitting here talking about it, there's no way to value a product for there's no sustainable system
All
that
right.
does not use currency.
So
There's not one country out there that is operating on this no currency concept.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
But there's no sustainable
The
economic
voice
system.
in your head is becoming your
We can't
reality.
even conceptualize.
What if I told you that someone has been with you every second of every day for your entire
Somebody
life?
better figure it out.
They've watched every success, every mistake,
you're gonna have
every
mass-
heartbreak, every victory, every disappointment.
The thing is
they've been
that
there
humans are
through
very resilient
every
people.
difficult conversation,
And
every
humans
sleepless
will
night,
survive. Like
every
you said, there
impossible
is,
decision,
uh,
every
the
dream you've ever dared to
governments
imagine.
without
They've commented
taxing,
on everything you've ever
will
done.
not.
Sometimes they've encouraged
if
you.
the people revolt,
Sometimes they've
there's
doubted
no
you.
way the government can
Sometimes
survive
they've
because
convinced
this
you
government
to give
is set
up
like a damn
before you
Ponzi
even
scheme.
began.
So
You know this
without
voice.
taxes coming in,
You've heard it
there's no way to
thousands of
sustain
times
the federal government
today because
That's
it's
what
your
I'm
own.
getting to is like if you don't have
But
the people
here's
out
the
there
question
working,
that almost
there is
nobody
no way
asks.
to pay taxes.
What
there is
if
no way
the
to
voice
sustain
inside
the
your
federal
head
government
isn't
systems?
always telling you the truth? What if the person you trust the most has always become the person who limits
It
you
goes
most?
back to zero.
Today, I want to explore
And the problem
something
with
that
going
has
back to
fascinated
zero is like
psychologists,
9/11.
neuroscientists,
Everything
and
in your
philosophers
freedoms
for
get
generations.
changed. As
Because
soon
before we
as-
finish, I want you.
That's what happens is if you're going to sacrifice something for something else, normally your freedoms get attacked.
Naomi, strike that.
And
I want to explore
you say
something that
this
has
universal,
fascinated psychologists, neuroscientists,
income-
and philosophers
wanna
for
say high
generations.
income 'cause I know
Because
that's
before we
bullshit.
finish, I think
You're
you're
going
going
to
to
give away
discover that
freedom
most
for
influential
this income.
relationship you'll ever
We're
have
already giving
isn't
away
with another
freedom.
person.
As of
It's with the
9/11, we're giving away
relationship
our
you
freedom right
have
now.
with yourself. Imagine
What is
carrying
going to
around a
happen
radio.
with this universal
Every moment of
income
your life,
is they're
it
gonna put you in
never
a job.
turns off.
Yeah,
it
maybe you
never
don't
runs
get-
out of batteries.
maybe you don't
it
get,
never leaves your side. Every minute
paid
it
or whatever.
broadcasts
Maybe
a
you do
story.
get this money. They're going to make
Sometimes
you do
that story
something, whether
sounds
it's a
hopeful.
Virtual
Sometimes
desktop
it
on your
sounds
computer
afraid.
At home where
Sometimes
they're
it
doing an
sounds
AI that's
angry.
monitoring you
Sometimes
doing
it sounds
something.
defeated.
They're not going to have
now
you sitting
imagine
at home watching
listening to that
Netflix
same station
and
for 30
getting
years.
paid to do that.
Eventually, you'd
That's-
stop questioning
I mean,
whether what it says
That's crazy.
is it
They're
actually
not gonna do
true.
that. They're not going to allow us to
You'd
sit
simply
at home,
assume that that's
get paid,
reality.
Make money.
That's
Look,
exactly
first
what
of all,
happens inside our
let's talk
minds.
about housing.
Most people think they see the world exactly
Who
as
pays
it
for
is,
housing?
but that's rarely true. We don't experience
the
life
energy come
directly. We experience it. We
to support
experience
you. I
it
mean, you got water
as an
plants, you got
interpretation
energy.
of life.
What does
Two
the government
people
take
can
over
walk
the whole
through
thing?
the exact same
And then
storm
there's no,
and
there's no
come
money.
away with
So you're
completely
just a
different
consumer?
stories.
I mean, we just talked about
One
China.
says that was
You're
the
a
worst
consumer.
day of
What,
my
you're
life.
not gonna have
The other
liberty
says
and the
that
freedom
they
of
changed
living
everything.
In your own environment.
The
You'll probably
storm
live
was
with 10
identical.
people
The story
in a
was
free
different.
house.
Have you
Be
ever
like a-
noticed how two people can receive the exact same criticism? One person thinks about it for 10 minutes, learns something,
I
and
don't
moves
see a
on.
sustainable
The other
system. I
replays
mean,
it for 10 years.
I'm not an economist.
Same
I'm
words,
just-
different
I am a
narrator.
capitalist.
Think
So
about that.
I'm sitting here going,
Your
there
life
is
isn't
no
only
way-
shaped by what happens to you. It's
There's no
shaped
way
by
that
the
they're going to do
meaning
that.
your mind assigns
here's the thing.
to what happens.
What I think is going to happen,
And here's what
is I think
is
we're going to have
remarkable.
a Great Depression. We're
Your
gonna,
brain
it's
doesn't
gonna
simply
drop
record
down.
experiences.
The money
It
will
builds stories.
Go away. The
Stories
people will
help
be
us
unemployed.
make sense
then
of
you're going
complicated.
To have this universal income
Naomi, strike
that's gonna
that.
come out. They're going to change it from a
Your brain doesn't simply record
it's going to
experiences.
become a
It builds
communist-type
stories.
country. I hate
Stories
saying
help us
communist
make
'cause that's
sense
actually the
of a
wrong
complicated world.
terminology.
They're
It's more
incredibly
like a
useful
Marxist
without
type
stories.
system
Every experience
where
would feel random.
you
But
are
stories
reliant
have a
upon the
hidden
government to
danger.
get this money,
Once we've
and
told
because of that,
ourselves
you're
the
gonna
same
give away
story
more freedoms
enough
than
times, we
give
stop
away today.
recognizing
The United
it
States of
as a
America,
story.
within the next
It
decade,
becomes our
is
identity.
probably going
Maybe
to
you've heard
crash.
someone say, I'm just not good with people. I've always been unlucky. I never finish
don't
what I
see a
start.
sustainable
I'm not
future. As soon
leadership
as that
material.
curve happens,
I've
as
never
soon as
been
that curve
creative.
happens,
I'm just anxious
and the
person.
unemployment starts going rapid,
Listen carefully
it's
to those
not gonna
sentences.
take more than 2 years for it to crash.
They don't sound like temporary experiences.
That's what I'm
They
predicting.
sound like permanent definitions.
I know there's people on the other
Somewhere,
side of the fence,
a moment becomes a memory. The memory
I mean,
becomes
I
a
can see it
belief.
coming.
The belief becomes a sentence. The sentence becomes an identity. And identity is one of the most powerful forces
that-
in
we're
human
already seeing
behavior.
that.
Because once you believe, I'm this kind of person, your brain begins protecting that identity.
But
even
is
if
there
it
one
hurts you.
sustainable
That's one
model
of the
without
strangest things about being human.
Where? What's the name
We
of it? I
defend
wanna
unhealthy
research it. I have not
identities
seen this.
simply because it's familiar. Someone who believes I'm
I
always
do find
rejected
that text
may
to me because I don't-
unknowingly avoid new relationships. Not because rejection is guaranteed, because avoiding people protects the story. Someone who believes I always fail may stop trying before success has opportunity to prove them wrong. Not because they're incapable, because failure fits the identity their brain has learned to expect. The frightening part is that most of this
you're
happens
saying-
automatically.
You're making it sound like back
Nobody
in the,
wakes up and says,
I
I think I'll limit myself
king
today.
times. I mean,
it
before the
happens one
Roman
thought
era. I mean,
at a
that was-
time.
That was
One
0
sentence
BC,
at a
even
time.
Before then, they
One
had currency.
conversation with yourself at a time.
I mean, they started.
And
from
after
this
enough years,
way
those
back when,
conversations
and there
become
wasn't
familiar.
A system that would sustain them
That
back
they
then.
feel like facts. But are they? That's the question I'd like you to carry
Yeah,
through this
I've got
entire
Roman coins
conversation.
back from,
Not what do I
like,
believe.
before
Instead,
Christ.
is it actually true? Because sometimes the most life-changing question isn't
Yeah, but how? I mean, if you that's a means. of
Naomi,
keeping
strike that.
track of something. that
That's
you
the
can put in your
question I'd
pocket
like you to carry
instead of
through this
carrying a
entire
chicken with you
conversation.
Down the road
Not what
to
do I
trade it
believe.
for a barter
Instead,
system.
is it actually true? Because sometimes the most life-changing questions
Right.
isn't finding a new answer. It's questioning the old story
Even
you've
barter
been
has
carrying
what they
for
call a
years.
Script, and
I'd like
it's
you to
not
imagine something.
currency.
Suppose
like a
someone
dollar
followed
bill.
you
It's
around
just-
all
it's
day
a-
long.
It's a ledger.
Not
It's
to
a
watch
ledger.
what you did, to listen
Exactly.
to what you said to yourself. Every private thought, every silent reaction, every opinion about
Yeah,
who
but
you
what
are.
drives the fluctuation?
At the
That's a
end of the
market.
day, they hand you
Yeah,
a
and if you
transcript.
don't have
Every
currency, there's
sentence,
nothing to
every
measure the
criticism,
market.
every excuse, every fear, every hope. Then they ask you one simple question. Would you speak to someone you
But
love
why would you
the way
get
you
rid
speak to
of a
yourself?
measurement that we've been
Most people
using
wouldn't hesitate.
for
The answer would be
hundreds
no.
of years,
We forgive
thousands of
strangers
years.
more quickly than we forgive ourselves. We encourage our friends more than we encourage ourselves. We celebrate other people's progress while we
Right.
quietly dismissing ourselves.
Right, I got one of those bills. Yeah.
Naomi, strike that. We celebrate other people's progress while quietly dismissing our own. It's strange, isn't it? If someone else followed you through life constantly saying, you're probably going to
I'll
fail,
do some more
don't
research
embarrass
into this,
yourself,
but
you're
there's
not
no
good
way
enough,
I could even
you'll
wrap
never
my
figure
head
this
around
out,
not
you'll always mess
having a
things
bunch of
up,
people
you'd
not
eventually
work
stop
and
spending
to
time
have a
with that
sustainable
person.
society.
But when those exact same words come from inside, we often call it being realistic. Maybe it isn't realism. Maybe it's repetition, because repetition has a remarkable power.
Of course.
Say something once, and it's a thought. Repeat it 100 times and it begins to feel like a fact. Think about advertising. Companies spend billions of dollars repeating the same message,
Is it a
not
show?
because they think you'll believe it the first time, because they understand that familiarity creates trust. The human brain naturally begins believing what it hears over and over and over again. Now imagine advertisement running inside your own mind 24 hours a day,
I'm
7 days a
familiar with it, but I
week,
haven't watched
for
it.
years.
I'm not into.
Who do you become? If the commercial never changes, imagine planting a tiny seed on the first day. It doesn't look like much. A week later, still almost nothing. Months pass, then one morning, a small shoot breaks through the surface. Thoughts grow the same way. Every repeated belief plants another seed. I can learn. I always fail. I'm resilient. I'm broken. I'm capable. I'm not enough. The brain doesn't instantly produce a forest. It grows whatever you continue to water. That's why the words you choose matter. Not because repeating positive phrases magically changes reality.
Zero utilities,
Reality still
zero
exists.
Water, zero
Challenges
everything. So,
still exist. Pain
it's
still
hard.
exists. The goal isn't pretending everything is wonderful. The goal is making sure your inner voice describes reality. Naomi, strike that. The goal isn't pretending everything is wonderful. The goal is making sure your inner voice describes reality instead of distorting it. There's an enormous difference between saying, this is difficult, and saying, I'll never get through this. One statement describes a moment. The other predicts the future. One leaves room for growth. The other quietly closes the door. Your brain hears both, but it responds very differently. Researchers have discovered that the brain is constantly filtering millions of pieces of information. You simply can't notice everything. So your mind creates filters. Those filters decide what deserves your attention. If you buy a red pickup truck, you suddenly notice red pickup trucks
farming
everywhere. Not because they suddenly appeared, because your brain decided that they mattered. Now you ask yourself, what happens if you spend years telling yourself, I'm not good enough? What does your brain begin looking for? Evidence. Every mistake becomes proof. Every criticism feels enormous. Every rejection becomes another exhibit. In a case you've been building against yourself. Meanwhile, your victories, your progress, your strengths quietly pass by, almost unnoticed. Not because they aren't real, because you filter was never looking for them. The remarkable thing is that you can begin changing the filter, not overnight, not with wishful thinking, with awareness. The moment you catch yourself saying, I always or I never, pause. Ask yourself, always? Never? Really?
Now, what about, since most of that...
Or is that simply the easiest story for my brain to tell?
Canada,
those two questions can interrupt years of automatic thinking. Because once you interrupt the pattern, you create space, and in that space, something new can begin.
But I'm just saying, like...
A different sentence.
We got a major problem.
A different belief. A different future. Maybe the voice in your head doesn't need to become louder. Maybe it simply needs to become more honest. There's a question I wish someone had asked me years ago. Who gave that voice permission to become the narrator of your life?
Well,
Think about it.
What's the number one?
Every story has a narrator. The narrator
versus
decides
backdrop?
what deserves attention, what gets remembered, what gets
No, we don't
ignored,
have that.
what
We already
everything means.
So that's what
Your life has one too. But here's the surprising part. The narrator isn't always, sometimes it's
we gotta
apparent.
eat every day.
whose words you've carried for decades. Sometimes it's a teacher who underestimated you.
massively sick
Sometimes it's
population
someone
with
who
those
criticized
days, yeah.
you during one painful season, and somehow their opinion became your identity. Sometimes it's a mistake you made years ago that your mind refuses to let go. And sometimes it's fear. Fear has a remarkable ability to distinguish itself as wisdom. It whispers, be careful. Don't get your hopes up. Stay where it's safe. People like you don't do things like that.
Yeah, but
The frightening part is that fear almost never introduces itself as fear.
Who is paying
It
for
sounds reasonable, logical, practical, responsible. That's why so many dreams don't die, because someone else destroyed them. They quietly disappear because the inner narrator kept talking long after everything stopped. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind can turn one event into an
But you're
entire
saying that
identity?
people aren't going to be making the income.
You forget the
income
one
and
person's
then the
name,
loans, everything
and
starts
suddenly
failing
I'm
if-
terrible
if
with
money's
names.
not being
One
transferred
relationship
back and
ends,
forth through
I'm impossible to
these
love.
systems.
One business fails, I'm
the money
not an
stops,
entrepreneur.
unemployment goes up,
One
money
presentation
stops.
goes badly,
If there's
I'm not a
not
good
an
speaker.
income in
It's incredible how fast our
taxes
brains jump from
for the
I
government,
experienced
even for-
this
I mean,
to
I think the government
this is who I am.
Finally, starting to realize
Those
wait a
are
minute.
two very different statements.
You start putting these
Experiences
robots
happen.
out there,
Identities are
and
chosen. Sometimes
not paying
consciously,
taxes.
often unconsciously. Imagine a little boy trying to learn how to throw a baseball. The first throw misses by 20 feet.
Well, you also
The second
fired all
isn't
your
much better.
taxpayers.
Now imagine if after the third attempt, he looked at himself and said, I guess I'm just this kind of a person who can never
But if
learn.
you're a farmer, you have
We'd
one
probably
customer
smile
that's
because
co-op.
we know that that's absurd. No
Or you
one
have
expects
HEB, or you
mastery
have
on
a
the
major
third
food
attempt.
source like
But
Walmart.
adults
You know,
do this to themselves
have a
every
handful
single day.
of people that
One
you
disappointment,
are
one
relying
setback,
upon, but the
one
farmers,
difficult
if you
season.
look, what was that,
And
2 decades
suddenly
ago,
they
whenever
begin
the farmers
describing
went
their
through this,
future using the language of
transition where they
temporary.
weren't getting that much
of a
money, and
temporary moment.
I can't remember what it was.
Naomi, strike that.
Yeah.
And suddenly they begin describing their future using the
We have $36
language
trillion
of a
in debt
temporary moment.
in
Your
the United
brain
States of
loves
America.
shortcuts.
How
If it
are
can
we gonna pay
create a
that
simple
debt?
explanation,
And
it
how
will.
are we gonna
Not
have a
because it's
sustainable
accurate, because it's
economy?
efficient.
We've got
That's
baby
why
boomers that are
labels
now
can become
retired.
dangerous.
We got our
I'm shy.
generation that's
I'm
not-
unlucky.
What are we,
I'm broken.
Gen Z?
I'm always behind. I'm not disciplined. Every
X?
label becomes a pair of glasses.
Gen X.
And once you're wearing them, everything
our
begins to
generation
look
that's
like
retiring.
proof.
So we got
The
two
truth is,
generations,
most
a
of us
massive
don't see
generation,
life
then a
through our
generation
eyes.
underneath
We see life through
that's
our
in
beliefs.
retirement. We've got unemployment.
There's an old
that's about to go
story
through the
about
roof.
two people
We've
looking
got-
out the same window.
I think
One
COVID
sees
was a
nothing
test to
but
see
mud.
what the American
The
people
other
would
sees
do.
stars
I just-
reflected in a puddle.
I think that- I
same
don't
window,
know.
same night, same world, different perspective.
It's not just a conspiracy
Perspective
theory. I mean, I'm
doesn't
starting to
change
think-
reality,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
it
I
dramatically
wanna see what's
changes
gonna happen
how
to
we
a mass
respond
population that's
to
not working.
reality. That's why two people can endure the same hardship and come away completely different. One becomes bitter, the other becomes wiser. One closes their heart, the other one learns compassion. The event was never the entire story. The narrator finished writing the ending.
Well,
Maybe that's
Trump
why
has to-
hope
he
is so
did an
powerful.
executive
Hope
order
isn't
where they have to
pretending
approve
pain
them
doesn't
before they do
exist.
something major.
Hope
So
simply
that's the reason
refuses
why
to
they're going
let
and talking to
pain
the president.
have the final
but-
word. And maybe that's
rightfully
exactly
so,
what our
because we
inner
are already
voice
at a
needs
stage
to
where
learn.
You can take these LLMs.
Not how to ignore every difficulty,
You can take that
not how
LLM
to
and put it into
pretend
iPad
every
and it
day
can
is
do
easy,
everything anyway
but how to
already.
tell a truer
So,
story. A story that says
we're
this
already
chapter
there.
is hard,
It's
but it
just
didn't.
now
The whole
with this
book.
new Model
Oh.
6, it's so much brighter and smarter than any scientist on the face of the planet that now that's making headlines.
Naomi, strike that.
People are nervous.
But how to tell a truer story? A story that says this chapter is hard, but it isn't the whole book. Because it
Those
isn't
little agile robots.
unless you decide to stop
Put this
writing.
inside their head.
That's something remarkable
they can
about
they
the
can
stories we
make
tell
decisions.
ourselves. They almost
With
always
guardrails,
begin
without
as an
guardrails,
attempt
whatever.
to protect
There's
us.
gonna be hackers out
Imagine
there that's gonna
touching
hack
a hot
into 'em,
stove
and it's gonna change
when you're
everything.
5 years
We're
old.
gonna have good
Your
and bad.
brain
I mean, that's
immediately
all
learns
throughout
hot
history,
hurts.
We've had good and bad.
That's useful. That's wisdom. But now imagine someone laughs at you when you're in middle school. You raise your hand, give the wrong answer, and the entire class erupts. I can relate. Oh my God. Your face turns red, your heart races, your stomach drops, your brain files
Talking about
that
spectrum?
away to
Spectrum type G. Like
only this
waveform?
time the lesson becomes
how'd
don't
that go?
speak up.
Well, I mean, I
years
love
later.
5G, so how'd
You're sitting
6G?
in a boardroom or a classroom or a family gathering. You have something valuable to say, but before you can
Ooh,
open your mouth,
Good for us.
that old narrator
infrared
quietly
is, but-
whispers,
but the
remember what
microwave's
happened
not.
last time. The strange part is the last time was 15
Caused
years
cancer?
ago. The people are different. The room is different. You've changed, but your brain is still trying to protect the version of you that existed back then. Isn't that incredible? Sometimes our minds are fighting battles that ended years ago. The danger disappeared, but the story remained.
Serious?
Maybe that's why healing
Holy
isn't about
smokes.
erasing the past. It's about teaching your brain that the past isn't happening right now. Think about soldiers coming home from war. Many of them hear a loud sound and instantly react. Not because they're irrational, because their brain learned that certain sounds meant danger. The brain
Oh,
doesn't
it's the other way
ask,
around. I
what
thought
year
the-
is it?
the higher
It
the
asks,
hertz, the farther it would
does
go.
this feel familiar? And if it does, it prepares you to survive.
Oh, okay.
The
Well,
remarkable
obviously,
thing
with
is
spacing.
that this
Yeah.
happens to all of us, not just with trauma, with ordinary life. One betrayal can make us, Naomi, strike that. One betrayal can make trust feel dangerous. One financial setback can make opportunity feel reckless. One painful relationship can make love feel risky. Your brain is always trying to keep you alive, but
So is it
sometimes it
viable?
protects you from things that could actually help you grow. That's why self-awareness is so important. Not because it makes
your house.
life easier, because it allows you to pause before your past makes another decision
Okay.
about your future. Imagine driving a car with the windshield covered in mud. You don't realize the mud is there simply
Lots of people. Let's test it and see if they get cancer.
Help me strike that. Imagine driving a car with the windshield covered in mud. You don't realize the mud is there. You simply believe the world looks blurry. Then someone cleans the glass suddenly. Nothing outside changed, only your ability to see clearly. Awareness looks like that. It doesn't erase every challenge, it removes some of the distortion. And once you see the distortion, you can't unsee it. You begin noticing how often your inner voice predicts
Weren't they using- I guess
disaster
because you
before
can't-
there's evidence. You notice how
They probably
quickly
are in between
it
the
assumes
towers.
the
I was seeing
worst.
line of sight
You
with-
notice how
with
often
lasers,
it speaks
in
with
between the
absolute
towers, but-
certainty.
And then
They'll reject
broadcasting,
me.
They might
This
do
will
that.
never
Who
work.
knows?
I'll embarrass myself.
course, fiber
I've
optics
missed
is
my
so much
chance.
better,
Have you ever noticed how confident your inner critic sounds? It's almost always says maybe. It says
Right,
definitely.
stuff gets in between.
You always. You never. It will. It won't. It's fascinating because life itself is rarely that certain. Your future is unwritten, yet our minds are often speak of it as though they've already read the ending. Naomi, strike that. It's fascinating because life itself is rarely that certain. The future is unwritten, yet our minds often speak about it as though they've already read the ending. What if your inner narrator isn't a fortune teller? What if it's simply making predictions based on old experiences?
On the moon, so.
If that's true, then predictions can question.
I don't know.
And if predictions can question,
who knows?
they can be rewritten. That doesn't mean you lie to yourself. It means you become curious. Instead of saying, I'll fail, you ask, what if I learn?
Yeah, who needs
Instead of saying,
well,
they'll reject me,
I mean,
you ask,
robots
what
do
if
it.
they don't?
Robots
Instead
do
of
it.
saying, it's too late, you ask, says
whether
who?
we need it or not doesn't mean
Curiosity
we won't be
has
affected by it.
remarkable
'Cause if it's
way of
broadcasting-
quieting certainty because certainty belongs to the narrator. Curiosity belongs to the learner, and learners keep growing. Narrators often keep repeating the same story. Maybe that's the invitation waiting for all of us, not to silence the voice inside our heads. That voice will probably always be there, but perhaps we can teach it to become less of a prosecutor
That way
and
they
more of a
communicate with each
coach.
other.
Less interested in proving why we can't, more interested in discovering what we're capable of becoming. Because the voice you listen to the most will eventually become the life you live. I'd like to tell you a story, not about someone famous, not about a billionaire, not about a celebrity, just about two ordinary people. Both of them wake up
Most of the time, I
on the
can't tell.
same Monday morning. Both have the exact same 24 hours. Both have dreams. Both have fears.
Yeah, that's
Both have
confusing.
reasons to stay exactly where they are. The first person wakes up and immediately hears the familiar voice. You're already behind. You don't have enough experience. Someone else can do it better. Why even try without realizing it?
Right.
That voice makes dozens of decisions before breakfast. The workout is skipped. The application is never submitted. The difficult phone call is postponed. The idea stays inside the notebook. Nothing dramatic happens. Life simply continues. Now look at the second person.
Right.
Here's the interesting part. They hear the exact
Somewhere in the world.
same voice. They feel the exact same fear. They experience the exact same uncertainty. The difference isn't that they silence the voice. The difference is that they stop giving it the final vote. They hear it, they acknowledge it, and then they quietly say,
Well, but
thank you
most of
for
that's gonna
trying
be
to
on
protect
board.
me. But I've
Robots,
got this.
They're not going to have.
Think about that.
Eventually-
The goal was never to eliminate fear.
Yeah,
the
eventually
goal
these
was
are gonna
to
be self-contained
eliminate
units
doubt.
that communicate. They're going to have their
The
own
goal-
LLM, like we have our own brains, and they'll be communicating. No, it'll be a robot just controlling.
Now let me strike that.
Yeah.
The goal was never to eliminate fear. The goal was never to eliminate doubt. The goal was simply to stop letting them make every decision. Maybe that's what maturity really is. Not becoming
I mean, you
fearless,
upload the skill.
learning which
So
voice
what we're doing,
deserves
Naomi,
the
is-
microphone. Because there are always multiple voices inside every human being.
I teach-
One says, play it safe. Another says, but what if? One says, you'll embarrass yourself. Another whispers,
It can transfer. that
you'll
skill
never
to
know
all of them.
unless you try. One reminds you of every mistake. Another reminds you of every lesson. The remarkable thing
what
is that
robots
both
are
voices
doing
are
today
trying
is
to
they have an
influence your
LLM
future.
local
Every
that
day
gets
they're
a
competing for
skill
your attention.
sent to it,
And
and if
attention
that
is one of the
robot,
most
hardware, and
valuable
the versions are all
resources
the same.
you possess. Whatever receives your attention begins receiving your
No, once
energy.
it gets the
Whatever
skill,
receives
it's
your
still-
energy begins shaping your reality. Imagine carrying two wolves inside your mind.
Yeah, but I
One
mean, we're
wolf
talking a Wi-Fi
feeds the
network, Steve,
feeds
like
on
5
fear,
point whatever
comparison,
gig. I mean, whatever's the
resentment,
Wi-Fi network
excuses,
that it's
certainty.
in.
The other feeds on curiosity, gratitude, growth,
You're talking
courage,
about a remote.
hope.
You're talking about
People
a
often
remote.
ask,
So
which wolf wins?
it would be
The answer
however
is
fast the
beautifully
network
simple.
is, the wireless
The one you
network
keep
that
feeding.
Those two robots.
Every thought is food. Every belief is food.
No, it's
every
small.
conversation
Small because
is
those
food.
those
Every
skills
podcast,
are
every
written
book,
in a code.
every person
I've been watching
you
all
spend
these
time
skills
with,
that
every
talking
hour
about
of
chat
every
building
day,
skills for Naomi.
you're feeding the
They're
voice.
written in a language that
Oh,
it's JSON, and they
Naomi,
use
strike
this
that.
JSON language.
every
and those
hour
are like
of
micro,
every day,
I mean,
you're feeding
literally just
one
for-
voice.
for-
or
if there
the
was
other.
two Naomis
That's
and one
why
was
the
on the other
people
side of the world,
around
it would
you
take her
matter so
milliseconds
much.
to get that
If
skill
you're
on the other side
surrounded
of the
by
world.
people who constantly
Literally.
tell you
It's not
what
doesn't
can't
take
be
hardly
done,
anything at all.
eventually
There's
their
not gonna be a
voices
live
become
link.
part of your
They're
own.
going to have their own LLM. Their
But
own
the
brain
opposite is
on
also
board,
true.
And
Spend
if
enough time
another
around
robot
people who
in a
believe
factory
that growth
somewhere
is
learns a
possible,
skill
that
and they're
failure
all
is a
under the same
teacher,
umbrella,
that
like
resilience can be
Tesla
learned,
bots.
and eventually their
As
voices
soon as
begin
that
changing
robot,
yours.
Whatever the
That's
security
one
level
reason
is,
I hope these
allows
conversations
all the
become
robots to
more than
upgrade
just
to that
another
skill.
podcast. I hope
They're
they
gonna
become
have
a healthier voice
And as long as they're the same
in the background of
version,
your own thinking.
just
Not
like
because
when you
I
do a
have all the
Windows
answers.
update, if that version
Yeah.
is the same,
Believe me,
then
I don't.
They will instantaneously have those
But because sometimes
There's not
all it
training,
takes
there's nothing.
is
They
hearing
will
one different
automatically-
perspective
that's the most
to begin
amazing thing
asking a
about
better
robots
question.
is that they'll
And better questions
they
often
can be
lead
on an
to
assembly
better
line, and all
lives.
of a sudden they do an
Instead of
update, they
asking,
won't do
why
an
does
update
this
when they're
always
on
happen to
assembly
me?
line, but
What
they'll
if
do
you
it at
ask,
night when they're sitting
what
there
is this trying to teach me?
recharging or whatever
Instead
they
of
do at
asking,
night,
what
if
if
they're
I
not
fail?
working and they're charging,
What if
they're
you
probably
ask,
updating,
what if this
and then as soon as the
exactly
update
what I needed to
happens, once they
become
get charged
stronger?
again, or
Instead of saying,
refueled
I'll
with
never
hydrogen
recover,
or whatever they're
what
using
if
for their
you
fuel,
said, I
go
don't
back to the
know
line, they
how
might
this
be
chapter
updated
ends
by that
yet?
time.
Do you hear the difference? Those aren't positive affirmations. They're honest possibilities. They leave room for hope. They leave room for growth. They leave room for the future that your current emotions cannot yet imagine. And maybe that's the
allowance
greatest gift you can
is
give yourself.
like-
Not
Yeah,
certainty.
I get what you're saying.
Not
I mean,
perfection.
machine-to-machine
possibility.
communication.
Because
I
the
get it.
moment you
I
begin
get it, but
believing
most of
that
these
your
machines
story
don't have
is still being
onboard
written, everything
logic.
changes.
Like Tesla
You're no
has their
longer
own
protecting the
onboard.
person you used
The
to
reason-
be.
it was funny
You're
how you had
investing in the
mentioned
person
that
you're
they don't
becoming.
have the sensors,
And those
they
are
don't
two
have
completely
anything.
different lives.
That's by design.
Before we
because
leave today, I'd like you to remember something.
What Tesla did
You're listening to a
was- and it was
voice
funny
every
because the guy
single
from
day,
NVIDIA helped
whether
them
you
design
realize it or
the chip.
not. That voice is helping shape the
Basically,
life you're
the reason
living.
why they did
Not
that is
because
because
thoughts
Elon wanted a
magically
robot to
become
be able to
reality,
be offline,
but because
to be
thoughts
able to
become
operate
decisions.
offline where it
Decisions
doesn't have
become
any
actions.
communication with
Actions
anybody,
become habits,
and it
and
can still
habits become
operate just
character.
like a human,
And
like
character
the-
quietly
the
becomes
sensors
your
and
life.
everything are just like human.
That's why the
Because it
conversation
he wanted
inside
it
your
to be
own
able to
mind
adapt
is
to
the most
environment that it
important
was in
conversation
without
you'll ever
the
have. At the
So,
beginning, I asked
it's
you what the
interesting.
voice inside your head
Well,
isn't always telling
Have we
you.
beat this horse to death?
The truth. Now I'd like to ask a different question.
All right,
If
everybody.
that voice
thanks for
isn't
watching
always
and
right,
with us. Thank
why
you so
have
much.
you been treating
if you haven't
it
subscribed
like the final
to the
authority?
New rabbit holes, like I said,
Every
you can
one of
find
us
it.
has thoughts
It's got a blue
that
icon
simply
now.
aren't true.
I'll put it on the screen.
I'm too late.
It's
I'm not
you
enough.
Can, you can find it.
I'll
now
never
by
change.
Typing in resilience
They're
radio
better than
rabbit,
me.
and it'll
I've
pop
ruined
up as
everything.
the first one.
Those
but
thoughts
anyway,
feel
thanks
convincing.
everybody. Thanks,
But
Steve,
feelings are
and,
not
we'll be
evidence.
coming back
They're
next time.
experiences.
Later.
And experiences are temporary. You don't have to believe every thought simply because it entered your mind. Imagine standing beside a busy highway. Thousands of cars pass by. You notice them, but you don't chase every single one. Thoughts are remarkably similar. Some deserve your attention, many don't. Just because a thought arrives doesn't mean it deserves to stay. One of those greatest forms of emotional maturity is learning to let unhelpful thoughts continue down the road without climbing inside and allowing it to drive your future.